Chapter 60 of Lorna Doone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Liz Lassiter, St. Louis, Missouri, 2008. Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore, Chapter 60. Annie, luckier than John. Some people may look down upon us for our slavish ways, as they may choose to call them, but in our part of the country we do love to mention title, and to roll it on our tongues with a conscience and a comfort. Even if a man knows not, through fault of education, who the Duke of this is, or the Earl of that, it will never do for him to say so, lest the room look down on him. Therefore he must nod his head and say, "Ah, to be sure, I know him as well as ever I know my own good woman's brother. He married Lord Flipflap's second daughter, and a precious life she led him," whereupon the room looks up at him. But I, being quite unable to carry this all in my head, as I ought, was speedily put down by people of a noble tendency, apt at lords, and pat with dukes, and knowing more about the king than his majesty would have requested. Therefore I fell back and thought, not daring in words to do so, upon the titles of our horses. And all these horses deserved their names, not having merely inherited, but by their own doing earned them. Smiler, for instance, had been so called, not so much from a habit of smiling, as from his general geniality, white nose and white ankle. This worthy horse was now in years, but hale and gay as ever, and when you let him out of the stable, he could neigh and whinny, and make men and horses know it. On the other hand, Kickums was a horse of morose and surly order, harboring up revenge, and leading a rider to false confidence. Very smoothly he would go, and as gentle as a turtle dove, until his rider fully believed that a pack thread was enough for him, and a pat of approval upon his neck the aim and crown of his worthy life. Then suddenly up went his hind feet to heaven, and the rider for the most part flew over his nose, whereupon good Kickums would take advantage of his favourable position to come and bite a piece out of his back. Now, in my present state of mind, being understood of nobody, having none to bear me company, neither wishing to have any, an indefinite kind of attraction drew me into Kickums' society. A bond of mutual sympathy was soon established between us. I would ride no other horse, neither Kickums would be ridden by any other man. And this good horse became as jealous about me as a dog might be, and would lash out or run teeth foremost at any one who came near him when I was on his back. This season the reaping of the corn, which had been but a year ago so pleasant and so lightsome, was become a heavy labour, and a thing for grumbling rather than for gladness. However, for the sake of all, it must be attended to, and with as fair a show of spirit and alacrity as might be. For otherwise the rest would drag, and drop their hands, and idle, being quicker to take infection of dullness than of diligence. And the harvest was a heavy one, even heavier than the year before, although of poorer quality. Therefore I was forced to work as hard as any horse could during all the daylight hours, and defer till night the brooding upon my misfortune. But the darkness always found me stiff with work, and weary, and less able to think than to dream, maybe, of Lorna. And now the house was so dull and lonesome, wanting Annie's pretty presence, and the light of Lorna's eyes, that a man had no temptation, after supper time, even to sit and smoke a pipe. For Lizzie, though so learned and pleasant when it suited her, never had taken very kindly to my love for Lorna, and being of a proud and slightly upstart nature, could not bear to be eclipsed in bearing, looks, and breeding, and even in clothes, by the stranger. For one thing I will say of the Doones, that whether by purchase or plunder, they had always dressed my darling well, with her own sweet taste to help them. And though Lizzie's natural hate of the maid, as a Doone and burdened with father's death, should have changed to remorse when she learned of Lorna's real parentage, It was only altered to sullenness and discontent with herself for frequent rudeness to an innocent person, and one of such high descent. Moreover, the child had imbibed strange ideas as to our aristocracy, partly perhaps from her own way of thinking, and partly from reading of history. For while, from one point of view, she looked up at them very demurely, as commissioned by God for the country's good, from another sight she disliked them, as ready to sacrifice their best and follow their worst members. Yet why should this wretch dare to judge upon a matter so far beyond her, and form opinions which she knew better than declare before mother? But with me she had no such scruple, for I had no authority over her, and my intellect she looked down upon, because I praised her own so. Thus she made herself very unpleasant to me, by little jags and jerks of sneering, sped as though unwittingly, which I now considered myself allied to the aristocracy, and perhaps took airs on that account, had not wit enough to parry, yet had wound enough to feel. Now anyone who does not know exactly how mothers feel and think would have expected my mother, than whom could be no better one, to pet me and to make much of me under my sad trouble, to hang with anxiety on my looks, and shed her tears with mine, if any, and season every dish of meat put by for her John's return. And if the whole truth must be told, I did expect that sort of thing, and thought what a plague it would be to me, yet not getting it, was vexed, as if by some new injury. For mother was a special creature, as I suppose we all are, being the warmest of the warm, when fired at the proper corner, and yet, if taken at the wrong point, you would say she was incombustible. Hence it came to pass that I had no one even to speak to about Lorna and my grievances, for Captain Stickles was now gone southward, and John Fry, of course, was too low for it, although a married man, and well under his wife's management. But finding myself unable at last to bear this any longer, upon the first day when all the wheat was cut, and the stalks set up in every field, yet none quite fit for carrying, I saddled good Kickums at 5 in the morning, and without a word to mother, for a little anxiety might do her good, off I set for Molen parish, to have the counsel and the comfort of my darling Annie. The horse took me over the ground so fast, there being few better to go when he liked, that by 9 o'clock Annie was in my arms, and blushing to the colour of Winnie's cheeks, with sudden delight and young happiness. "You precious little soul," I cried, "how does Tom behave to you?" "Hush," said Annie, "how dare you ask? He is the kindest, and the best, and the noblest of all men, John, not even setting yourself aside. Now look not jealous, John. So it is. We all have special gifts, you know. You are as good as you can be, John, but my husband's special gift is nobility of character." Here she looked at me as one who has discovered something quite unknown. "I am devilishly glad to hear it," said I, being touched at going down so. "Keep him to that mark, my dear, and cork the whiskey bottle." "Yes, darling John," she answered quickly, not desiring to open that subject, and being too sweet to resent it. "And how is lovely Lorna? What an age it is since I have seen you! I suppose we must thank her for that." "You may thank her for seeing me now," said I, "or rather, seeing how hurt she looked, you may thank my knowledge of your kindness, and my desire to speak of her to a soft-hearted, dear little soul like you. I think all the women are gone mad. Even mother treats me shamefully. And as for Lizzie—" Here I stopped, knowing no word strong enough without shocking Annie. "Do you mean to say Lorna is gone?" asked Annie, in great amazement, yet leaping at the truth as women do, with nothing at all to leap from. "Gone, and I never shall see her again. It serves me right for aspiring so." Being grieved by my manner, she led me in where none could interrupt us, and in spite of all my dejection, I could not help noticing how very pretty and even elegant all things were around. For we upon Exmoor have little taste, All we care for is warm comfort, and plenty to eat and to give away, and a hearty smack in everything. But Squire Faggus had seen the world, and kept company